Well, hello everyone. My name is Jeff Hewlett, founder and president of Personal Finance Reimagined. And today's a little bit different. You'll notice I'm not in my usual place. So we're doing something a little different in that we are offsite, located at DecisionMap's world headquarters in beautiful Great Falls, Virginia. So the purpose today is this interview explores how value-based investing, personalized planning, and early habit formation can empower young adults to build long-term wealth. Luke Avery shares insights from DecisionMap's client-first approach to wealth management and highlights how accessible strategies from disciplined savings to perhaps using robo-advisors can bridge the gap for future investors on the path to financial confidence. This month is Investing Month at PFR, Personal Finance Reimagined. I created this series to help young adults, okay, especially those early in their careers, to develop a confident, repeatable investing process. And we'll talk more about that as we chat with Luke. As a personal finance professor and a veteran banker, I've seen how intimidating the world can be when it comes to investing, like market volatility, the flood of digital advice, and uncertainty around which approach is best. That's why this month we're focused on what it takes to build long-term wealth. Today's conversation will explore how mindset tools and strategic guidance can help young investors stay smart and stay on course. Okay, so today's guest is Luke Avery. Luke is the AVP and Relationship Manager at DecisionMap Wealth Management. Luke works alongside seasoned advisors to guide families through personal financial planning and investment strategies. With a background at Goldman Sachs, as well as a business degree from George Mason, Luke brings experience, insight, and a relatable voice for wealth building conversation. He represents the next generation of advisors, one who not only understands financial strategy, but also connects with his young investors working to build their financial foundation. His journey from student to advisor makes it a valuable voice to help investors get started right away. So welcome, Luke.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Really appreciate the time today.
Oh yeah, well, I appreciate your time too, and I love being here at the big HQ. It's nice to get out of my
Our world
studio.
headquarters.
That's right, absolutely. So why don't we go ahead and just jump right in, and really let's focus a little bit more on your journey, your personal journey. Really, how did you get here? What got you interested in investing, whether it be personal, professional, then making the leap into the profession of investing, and then ultimately, how did you find your way here to DecisionMap?
Absolutely. I kind of always had a fascination with money. I really enjoyed starting businesses when I was a kid. Whether that was mowing the lawns or helping out with various activities. And then when I kind of got into high school, I really started learning about the behavioral side of finance and kind of been like, okay, I need to really consider my kind of finances and kind of build that initial landing ground that I really want to base my kind of financial future on. Just keep on starting here, and we're basically building up from there.
Okay.
So that was my kind of early introduction into finance.
Well, so when I think about DecisionMap, and Paul Bennett, the CEO, and I have had this conversation. Paul has this PhD, and I consider him a behavioral finance person. I'm a behavioral economist, so we kind of have that geeky behavioral overlap in our training and background. You mentioned the word behavior or behavioral.
Certainly.
Did that attract you here to DecisionMap? Like, of all the different sort of firms that you could have joined, and I know you spent a little bit of time at Goldman. What was it about the behavioral side that interested you?
Certainly. So when I got to know Mark and Paul initially, when I started working with them, I really appreciated their approach to the behavioral side of finance and really getting to know our clients. We really make it an emphasis on getting to know the client's personal background, getting to know their goals, their values, and have that real deep connection that we really want to have with people. And then we kind of from there end up working with them. But some other firms potentially could only be focused on investing, only focused on one specific area. We really like to get to know everybody and their unique goals, which really I like working with them because of that. It's a very holistic approach.
Nice. No, I love that. So when I talk to Paul, he talks about the real importance of long-term planning. So what I'm curious about is going from your day-to-day and connecting that to that vision around long-term planning. Tell us a little bit about how you help the clients and what you do relating to clarity, confidence, and control for those clients.
Certainly. I help Mark and Paul. We're a very collaborative team, so we all kind of work on each other's cases. In that sense, I help building financial plans. I help build investment portfolios, and kind of help design the client's initial plan that the Mark and Paul then go over with all of our clients. So I'm really involved in a sense in a lot of the initial planning, a lot of in the strategic decision making that Paul and Mark. I get to see that work in real time. And so that has been I've been really fortunate to be able to see that.
Okay.
And then just kind of working and like being able to build and craft investment portfolios that make sense with the client's long-term goals. That's been a really cool thing to be able to do and kind of learn about, different asset classes and how they relate to a client's goals.
Now, how does it work with the family dynamic? So I'm assuming there's usually a patriarch or matriarch that's sort of the client, so to speak. But of course, people have children, relatives. Talk a little bit about that. Like how is that, when you talk about holistic approach, how does that involvement usually go beyond the main client, so to speak?
Certainly. So we definitely take a multi-generational approach in our financial planning process. We really value the estate planning, and if that's certainly a goal of the client, we like to work with our clients' kids pretty early on. A lot of our clients' kids are kind of in the same age range as I am, plus or minus maybe 5 or 7 years. So we're all kind of getting started in our careers. We're getting where the first initial choices that we make are very important in our financial journey, and getting used to investing and getting used to savings. So it's having those early conversations with our clients' kids can really set them on a path to secure their financial future early on.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. So, Paul really emphasizes, the whole idea of every financial decision should reflect a client's values. So tell me a little bit about that. How, I'm imagining, it's one thing to execute a plan against values, but it's also a whole other thing to help a client reveal their values. Like it's one thing to say, I want to help people or I want to get rich, but those are more like goals and objectives than values. And I guess in my experience, values are weirdly difficult sometimes to really identify. So I'm just curious about that. Do you guys have a method or an approach that goes beyond executing against those values, but actually gets into helping them to reveal their values? And what if their values change, right? Like what if, hey, yesterday I was all about X and today I'm all about Y, so talk a little bit about that.
Well, primarily what we do is we have a proprietary exercise that we go through with all of our clients. We kind of get to know them and get their values, and they're questions such as, I want to maximize my giving. I want to create a legacy for my children. I want to, what if I'm not around tomorrow? I want to create these goals. And that often helps, like we would consider like the top part of the family dynamic. For the kids, mainly it's more about focusing on, would I like to travel more?
Right.
Am I taking advantage of my time kind of early on to go explore and do things that I want to do right now, and having a balance between, I want to have a nice lifestyle now versus I need to save for my future, and just kind of being able to meld those two. So we go through that exercise, and then that kind of helps us narrow the financial plan into that, kind of mold it around there.
Well, it's funny you mentioned something, so when I have children that are basically your age, tell you how old I am, but one of the things we talk about is that your 20s is the me decade, right? And I'll tell you, I'll share with them, I don't know if they listen to me, but I'll share, is pronouns are really important, because in the me decade, you do certain things, but once you get into the 30s, it pretty much flips from the me to the us. And when there's an us, and especially if there's little us's running around, the me and us that you becomes subservient to that, because now you have young kids, and your life and your priorities just completely change. So that's one of the things we talk about in the me decade. And I always say the 20s, maybe it's in their 30s, however long me lasts.
Certainly.
How do you think about, so, and you brought something up, and I want to ask you about it, which is, the whole notion of convexity and the time value of money, compound interest, right? A 40-year time frame is massively different than a 30-year time frame in say, a diversified portfolio. So if you wait till you're in your 30s to get serious about that there's a cost to that. So talk a little bit about that. How do you get them to sort of understand what that trade is, and then sort of come up with a plan that lets them do some of both?
Sure. So we have a really cool scenario analysis tool that will allow us to run a Monte Carlo simulation. And basically what that equates to is we run thousands of different returns to basically show a client, what if I saved now? What does the probability of success look like for my plan? So we always use the financial plan as that North Star,
right?
That when we're talking about that, and then also the plan has flexibility to add in goals and say, oh, well, maybe in 3 years I want to have a wedding goal, and then we can allocate a certain amount of money to that and see what the likelihood of success is continuing on for your future. So it's just building in the sequence of returns and showing people, if you start investing now, maybe you can retire earlier. Maybe if you do not invest as much, you might be able to retire at 60 and then just kind of having those, push and pull conversations about the trade-offs is really important.
Right. So that you mentioned the word scenario planning in Monte Carlo, which, just to have a little conversation about that. So that's basically providing for simulating different paths, right? And there's lots. Every decision you make has a path. So you make a decision today, there's a path. Well, there's multiple paths you could take with a single decision. So what Luke's talking about is, hey, let's back it up, not from where we ended up, but back it up to decision day, figure out what our decisions are, and then let's see, using Monte Carlo simulation, let's see what those future paths could turn out to be. And the reason I like that too is because we all know that life's volatile, the market is volatile. We were talking about earlier this year, there's a big sell-off. Now we're at the middle of 2025, there's a big rise, so stuff changes, right? And so, but the point is, the longer your time frame, the more likely you are to hit actual market averages over time. So, hey, if you're planning on something next week, well, that's a crapshoot. But if you're planning on something in 5-10 years from now, well, actually, 8 to 10% returns, not that, that's probably within a couple standard deviations of being correct, right? So, anyway, so I love how you talked about bringing those tools to let people see multiple futures, right? Now, let me ask you another question in terms of, we all know people can be fickle, right? Like, that seemed like, one of my favorite sayings is that seemed like a good idea at the time, right? So, and then all of a sudden you're not doing that. So to talk about two things. One is, how do you hold people accountable for those early decisions? So if they get to you and say, hey, you know what, I thought that was a good idea at the time, and now I think I want to do something a little bit different. How do you, one, encourage them to either stay on the path, or two, help them understand sort of the implications of straying from that path?
Sure. I mean, it kind of goes back into the running the different simulations, so we can put those goals and desires or other things that we want to do inside of the plan and see what that looks like. Oftentimes, it's just having a conversation about the client's actual values and figuring out, is this a decision that we've really thought about and we've kind of vetted, or is it a quick, I'm going to react to something? And instead of just reacting to things, we want to make sure that we're being very proactive in our planning process. And so we never want to react to when the market sells off. We want to make sure that if our time horizon is 7+ years, we want to make sure that we're maintaining kind of that strategy going forward, because that's money that we're not touching basically for that period of time. So it's just kind of about having that open conversation with clients, and sometimes those conversations can be a little bit challenging, but they're definitely extremely helpful to have and necessary.
Now, curious, how often do you use a regular review cycle, or is it just more on a change event, like, oh, I want to do something, so they call you up and come in?
There are times where it's both, actually. So we do quarterly meetings with some clients. Some clients like annual meetings. Some clients like meeting twice a year. Some may even meet more than a year, depending on if their situation changes or not. And most often the clients know that we're a phone call or an email away. So if there is a sudden impact to their changes, then they can just let us know and reach out.
So I bet Paul and Mark get emails at all times of the day, or texts even, like, oh, freaking out. Blah, blah, blah. It's calm down.
Work
the plan,
This
plan
is
the
why we
work,
have a
it's
diversified
okay.
portfolio. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. We have lots of different swimmers in different
Right.
swim lanes.
I could
So
only
that helps.
imagine, like, the whole, the political situation. I'm not going to
Sure,
go into
yeah, sure.
politics, but I can only imagine that there's probably, President Trump is a divisive character. So it feels a little bit like either you love him or you hate him. And I'm sort of assuming that Mark and Paul and you sort of have variations of both those things, right? Like some people are like whatever into the current administration.
Sure.
Other ones are like, this is driving me nuts. Blah blah blah. And I'm guessing you have to play almost like a nonpartisan, honest sounding board that's pretty apolitical, regardless of your views, right? It's just like, well, my views aren't important. The point is, let's work the plan.
Certainly.
So do you talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. So we like to disassociate the political environment with the economic environment because it's important. It's important to kind of separate those things because it may not, like the market sold off due to the Liberation Day tariffs and the uncertainty behind that, and it comes back based on the whims of what.
Right.
Like it just
sounds like a buying opportunity.
Correct. Correct. If you're investing for long term, sounds like a buying opportunity or getting things on sale. But it's really just about reinforcing the strategy to our clients, saying that we have money in different diversified buckets,
right?
So basically, we can withstand market volatility and kind of just getting back to the economics because everybody loves to kind of jump to conclusions about politics, and we're really trying to focus on finances and make sure that part is sound for the client, so that it doesn't really matter the political environment that we're in.
Well, there is one truism that I've found is you can make money in volatility. You can't make money in absolute consistency. Like if the treasuries are at 4%, they'll be at 4% for, you're going to make 4%. But in volatility, you actually, if you play it right, you do have the ability to actually make money. So to some degree, an environment that creates volatility, while it drives people crazy, on the other side of it actually creates an opportunity.
Sure.
And I'm guessing that's part of like, hey guys, there's a couple ways of looking at this.
Certainly.
Let's look at the good side of this, right? Which is, hey, this volatility we might be able to trade into it versus running away from it.
Certainly, and another point to your point about market volatility is, when you're making contributions to your 401k, you're dollar cost averaging into the markets. You're basically buying on a steady interval throughout your pay periods, and so that's a really interesting thing that, when a lot of people talk about the market going down, everyone that's still contributing to their 401k is effectively buying at a lower price, which is
they're getting their bases down.
They're getting their bases
Trade
down.
your bases down. Yeah, I love that. That's great. Well, let me switch gears a little bit. You're a 20-something dude, up and coming wealth manager here at DecisionMap, a future CFP. I'm
Absolutely.
guessing, right? So I know it takes time. That's awesome. But talk a little bit about the difference. Like you look at a guy like me, I'm more like probably look at the age and the part from central casting of one of your typical clients, let's say mid-50s, 60s, whatever. But you're dealing probably a little bit more with their children. Tell me about the difference between mom and dad and child, and just in terms of how their children look at the world, how they think about wealth. Is it a problematic difference or not?
I wouldn't say it's a problematic difference per se. I think it's a different lens. So often, we have clients that are approaching retirement. They're not in a very aggressive portfolio, or maybe they are depending on their risk tolerance, but we're very, very sensitive to making sure that the risk metrics are properly allocated for the client situation.
So their view is, however old I am, I've got 20 years of life left on this planet if I'm lucky. And so everything is, how do I get to the end of this 20-year period and have enough money and do the things I want to do, versus their children are like, first of all, they're so young, they probably don't even think they're ever going to die. Isn't that a nice problem to have? But either way, it's 60 years or some time horizon. So a little bit about the differences and how you advise the children versus their parents.
Sure. So oftentimes we work with people that are around my age, and so we're just starting out in our careers, relatively speaking, and we're building our financial foundation right now. And so what's really important is making sure that we're educating our clients' kids, young adults, on the importance of saving, the long-term savings, short-term savings for your short-term goals,
Like emergency funds?
like emergency
that kind of
funds,
thing?
making sure you have adequate cash on hand for your situation, and then basically just kind of managing and talking about risk, because a lot of us don't have a whole lot of experience investing in the stock. We don't have decades of experience investing in the
Right.
stock market, so it's looking at the risk versus reward and kind of the market
Okay.
moving, kind of understanding how that all works.
Let me pause you there for a second. That's a really interesting thing, because when I teach at James Madison, a lot of what I teach is, well, I'm teaching them technical stuff. It's literally, I've been through, like 3 major recessions at this point. So for me, emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost like I get it. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It's a cycle. Cycles go up, cycles go down. My point in saying that, though, is imagine if it's your first cycle. So you can have all this like intellectual, this is what they teach, this is what a cycle is, it'll come back. But I can just imagine the first time through it, it's like, WTF. It's like,
Certainly.
so it's almost like this disconnect between almost like the education and the understanding, objectively versus your gut, and your gut screaming at you, this is horrible. Can you talk a little bit, like, how do you coach, even your older clients, but especially the younger clients that have not experienced a downturn like that?
So I think the COVID was a big eye opener for specifically for my generation, because that was the first kind of financial and like kind of big crisis that we kind of really experienced in our young adult lives. And so kind of going through that, seeing that, and then seeing the down market in 22, that was when I came into the industry in early 22. So that was very interesting to see. And then kind of experiencing the client reactions to that event made me really think about, analyzing risk and making sure that our younger clients are educated on that topic.
Right.
Because when I was, learning through it the first time, experiencing that with Mark and Paul and our clients, it was really eye-opening, and I just wanted to make sure that our younger clients know, like, this is kind of how this stuff has worked. This is what volatility is.
Right.
How to sometimes take advantage of it depending on what you're doing, what your situation is. So
Right.
it's just more about educating.
Right. So it's funny. One of the things we talk about with Personal Finance Reimagined, either with clients or at JMU. We talk a lot about set it and forget it, and almost like don't drive yourself crazy by watching the market. Turn it off. Like if you have a 20-year time horizon, why torture yourself?
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't matter. Set it and forget it. Follow the strategy. Now, to some degree, that's a little Pollyannish. Maybe every once in a while I do. Oh, how's it going? But, and of course, if it's going down, it's always like, if it's red, if it's green, it's like, yay. But even the positive, I try to be like, you know what, I'll see you in 20 years kind of thing. And anyway, so that's just an aside. I think it's one thing to coach and suggest that, and I think it's a completely other thing to like actually not look.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is like shift a little gears towards, so Personal Finance Reimagined, we are a kind of a behavioral finance, behavioral economics focused company, and we kind of use like the 80-20 rule or even the 90-10 rule, which is really 80 to 90% of what you do is habits and behavior. And especially in today's world with automations and apps and stuff like that, we really talk to them a lot about habits and behavior, building that kind of almost like muscle memory to even coach themselves about how to have the right thinking and approach, mindset, etc. But if you would talk a little bit about that, just if setting yourself aside, if you had a friend or even somebody that you were just getting to know, they're in their mid-20s, and you want to give them one piece of behavioral advice, what might that be?
I would say it would definitely be paying yourself first.
Okay.
So whether that's setting up, as you were discussing, an automatic investment into your Roth IRA, into a brokerage account, into your 401k. Just kind of getting the savings muscle built up.
Right.
And paying yourself first also includes, paying for your own for education, whether that's employer or supplemented, like a 529 for potentially if you have kids, and also getting certifications to improve your human capital because as you become more valuable to the workplace and build your skills,
you get paid better.
You get paid better.
Yeah, funny how that works.
So that also helps supercharging your growth in whatever your chosen industry is.
It's funny, we talk a little bit about that, and one of the things we talk about too is the whole idea that if you're working for a firm, in your 20s especially, there's a real tax on loyalty. And I hate to say it like this, but I call it a tax because basically if you stay at a single firm, you're going to get 5 to 10% increases. Maybe you're going to get a bonus based on whatever, however the firm's doing, but your upside is still capped to about 5 to 10%. That's just kind of the way most companies, maybe not here at DecisionMap, but a lot of especially bigger companies kind of roll that way. So my whole thing is, well, or if you take, think of your skills as like a bag of skills, right? So you started with a smaller bag of skills, now you get a bigger bag of skills. Well, you pick up that bag of skills and you go to the next client who will basically could pay you 50% more or a much bigger number. And it sounds like I'm encouraging people to jump ship, but I guess what I'm really encouraging people, especially when they're younger, when that is, they have the advantage of a longer time frame of compound interest, that one way to really drive that is to be a little mercenary. Certainly with their client, and I hire people, so I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot a little bit. But at the same time, if you're really honest about it, right? I mean, that's kind of a reality. There is a loyalty penalty. I don't know.
It definitely depends on the industry.
Right.
We saw that a lot in 22 with jumping around with tech firms, especially. Right. But at the end of the day, if you know your skills and you know that you're valuable and you advocate for yourself, that's all you really need to do. The right firm will pay you what your skills are worth.
Yes.
To the market.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, good. So just to start to close here, and first of all, thank you so much. This has been awesome. But so for young adults who feel a little overwhelmed or unsure where to begin, so let's talk a little bit. Just like what's like a first thing? Like I don't do anything yet. Like, could you give them an idea of what would be a good place to start? And assuming they don't have a wealth advisor, like they're going to kind of DIY it to get going.
I think a really helpful tool is to develop a spending plan. I don't really like budgets, it feels a little restrictive. So we develop a spending plan, and it's really telling your money where to go. Right. And so there's a lot of helpful apps that integrate with brokerage accounts, that integrate with checking account, integrate with any loans that you may have. Right. So I would look for kind of setting up that kind of app. So like develop a spending plan.
Like, are you talking about like Acorns? I mean, just to give me an example.
Something like a Monarch or what was Mint. So so like kind of like an app that keeps track of where all your money is going. Right. Because at first it can feel overwhelming when you're you just started working, you're venturing out into the kind of adult world landscape, you have bills to pay, you're like, where's all my money going? Right. If you're not careful. And so it's really making sure that I am being intentional with my dollars that are coming in. And so it's kind of figuring that part out, getting that foundation.
I love the word intentionality. That sounds spot on. There's another thing that we talk a lot about with clients and with students is behavioral economics calls this very unfortunate thing that's going on today, but they call it sludge. And what sludge is basically where you have, it's like the opposite of an automatic investing. It's automatic spending, right? So it's where you basically set up on your credit card, hey, I have Netflix, or I have this subscription, or I have this.
Everything is $10 to $15 a month now.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a boil the frog thing, right? Like, because people are weirdly like, if it's small and it's just there, they just assume it should be there, and it's small, so not a big deal. And that sludge builds over time, and pretty soon you've got this like leakage just flowing
Leakage
out
of
of the
cash
bottom
flow,
of the bucket.
correct.
And
Yep.
so we talk a lot about like strategies. How do you like look at your credit card statements? Anyone with a 1-800 number is automated. And, you know, kind of one, and I'll just give this to you as a little example of a little strategy we give. And this, people react differently to this, but what I'll tell them is, here's the thing to do. You have your main credit card where all these automated things are. Set up a second credit card, start to use it a little bit, but at some point, cancel the card with all the automations on it. Because what it does is it changes the default decision from it's a defaulted spend to it's a defaulted not spend. And the amazing thing is, all the people that were getting those automations, they're going to be emailing you like crazy, and you know they're going to go, "Oh, what happened? We were getting all this money from you," and blah blah blah. So then it'll make the decision back to an opt-in decision instead of an opt-out. So anyway, so that may sound like a little bit like you know, like the nuclear option a little bit, but I'll be honest with
It's
you.
helpful to kind of segregate those
It
things.
just
for sure.
it forces you to put yourself into the like, I'm making the decision for the first time. Do I really need Netflix for $20 a month, or do I really need, you know, XYZ for XY, you know, ABC dollars? And
Sure.
I don't know. And if you do that every once in a while, your credit card is going like, why does he keep doing this? Anyway, well, it's been a lot of fun, Luke. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm
Thanks for
really,
having
really
me.
glad to have you and be part of this. And I want to remind everybody that this month is Personal Finance is Investing Month. So all month long, we're going to be focused on investing habits, tools, and whatnot. But it's all about creating a consistent, repeatable decision process for a lifetime of health and wealth. Really appreciate Luke being here with us, and DecisionMap here at World Headquarters for hosting us. Have a great day, Luke.
Thanks, Jeff.